Hello from Tokyo and Kolkata, and welcome to Fellow Meet, the program where you and I get a chance to meet and learn about the fascinating fellows from around our community. Today, I have with me Dr. Navras J. Aafreedi, a fellow of the Salzburg Global Seminar. Dr. Aafreedi is an assistant professor in the Department of History at Presidency University in Kolkata, and a research fellow at the Institute for the Study of Global Antisemitism and Policy in New York. At Presidency University, he teaches Jewish history, genocide studies, interfaith relations, and minority studies. He is a prolific writer, and in addition to his many papers and articles, he's also recently published the monograph, which I think he is going to show us here, Jews, Judaizing Movements and the Traditions of Israelite Descent in South Asia. And with Priya Singh, has recently co-edited Conceptualizing Mass Violence, Representations, Recollections, and Reinterpretations. And this book had its book launch just this past fall. Welcome, Dr. Aafreedi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huffman. I'm so grateful to you for inviting me for this conversation. It's such a privilege.
Oh, it's our honor to have you on the show. Since this is the TNSFA platform, I would like to mostly focus on your fellowship, what you're doing today, where you want to go in the future. But given your academic interests, it seems likely that any discussion that we have will very likely touch on some aspect of mass violence. So I was wondering if you could first give us a brief definition of what that means to you. What is mass violence to you?
Mass violence can have many varied manifestations. And mass violence may not even necessarily be physical in nature. We would be at an error. We would be, if we imagine that mass violence is inflicted only upon human beings. We as human beings are also guilty of perpetrating violence upon our environment, upon our nature, for which we have the nomenclature of ecocide, which should be as much of concern to us as anything else. In fact, perhaps more than anything else. So I try to understand mass violence in all its manifestations. When the Holocaust took place, Winston Churchill famously said that we have just encountered a crime without name. And it was in response to that this lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, coined the term genocide. When Raphael Lemkin coined the term genocide, he was also talking in terms of violence inflicted on a group's culture and language. That is, if there is an attempt to deprive a group of their language, then that too was seen as an act of violence, because that amounted to the destruction of the group's identity and sense of history, because both a group's identity and history are all passed on via language. Language is the vehicle that passes one's culture from one generation to another. So even an assault on culture and language is an act of violence, even if not physical in nature.
That's fascinating. I'm going to try to get a hold of your book, actually, and probably try to read that then.
Thank you. Thank you.
A lot of fun, yeah. Okay, now I'd like to move on to some of the questions that I would like you to tell us a little bit about your experience with the Salzburg Global Seminar. What did you do there? What were you able to take from that experience?
It was immensely rewarding attending the Salzburg Global Session on Holocaust education and genocide prevention. It led to my collaboration with a number of fellows from that session. Some of them became lifelong friends. And in the edited volume that I and Priya Singh have just brought out with Rutledge, Conceptualizing Mass Violence. So we have contributions from a number of Salzburg fellows in this volume. And it was immensely rewarding, as I said, given the fact that I got a global perspective from which to look at mass violence, see what happened in my own country in a global context, and it enabled me to better understand whatever I witnessed in my own country as well as elsewhere. It also made me conscious that I could always seek help from the Salzburg fellows who I had made friends with and who had agreed to collaborate with me.
I'm hoping that we can turn this platform itself into something similar, since we do have a number of different organizations that are involved in peace studies or those kind of things. My next question brings us more up to the present. What are you currently working on? What are you planning on putting out soon or in the next few years or whatever?
As of now, I am very concerned about the recent calls for genocide against Muslims in India. There are calls for retributive violence that emanate out of this sense of majority victimhood. So I am attempting to understand this better, that how this sense of majority victimhood comes into existence and how calls for retributive violence emanate out of that. I am at the same time trying to understand how anti-Semitism figures in the Hindu nationalist discourse. In addition to this, I would very much like to develop a general education course entitled Disarmament, Non-Proliferation and Peace Education, Lessons from Post-World War II Japan, which the course would take a stock of what it has achieved and give an idea of what we can all do to achieve lasting peace in the world by drawing lessons from Japan. Then in the long term, I would very much like to establish an MA program in mass violence and peace studies, but this is something that I cannot do single-handedly. I would need colleagues who would be qualified to teach genocide studies and who would have an equal degree of interest in the field. And I would also want to establish a research center devoted to these studies.
What exactly is your image of a research center for this? What would it would exist within the university, I assume? What would be its aims? What would it produce? You know?
I imagine that research center as a place where scholars would be able to devote themselves completely without worrying about anything else to the study of what triggers mass violence, how it can be prevented, and how we can achieve sustainable peace. What can be done to achieve sustainable peace? These would be the primary concerns of this research center, which could have the authority to award degrees, degree programs in the fields of genocide studies and peace studies.
Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us? Anything else that you'd like to, any PR that you'd like to do for yourself or anything along those lines?
I would like to take this opportunity to express my admiration for the work that the Nippon Foundation does.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for all the time that you gave me.
Most
welcome, most grateful to you.
And I would also like to thank our audience for tuning in. If any of you out there would like to get in contact with Dr. Aafreedi to discuss the kind of things that we talked about today, please do so. And as always, if you would like to introduce yourself to the community in this way, please contact me and I will help you to make a video along these lines. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.